Captain Lee Dongwu pressed his face against the cold metal bars and stared into the endless darkness of space. 3 years had passed since the alien ship had swallowed their vessel whole, and still he could not believe this was real. The stars looked different here, wrong somehow, like they were mocking him from behind a cage. The metal floor vibrated under his feet as something heavy moved through the station's corridors. Dongwu knew that sound well. The guards were coming for another human. Someone would be dragged away to fight in the arena again. Someone might not come back. "Captain," a soft voice called from behind him. Dr. Park Hee-jin walked over slowly, her medical bag clutched tight in her hands. Her face looked tired and sad, like everyone else in this place. "Kim Tae-ho wants to see you. He says it's important." Dongwu nodded and followed her through the narrow walkways between the cells. The specimen vault, as their captors called it, was a massive space station that held hundreds of different alien creatures. Humans were just one type of animal in this cosmic zoo, but they were special, the guards had told them. They were the most valuable. The human section was a series of connected cages made from some kind of unbreakable alien metal. Each cell was just big enough for 2 people to lie down. There was no privacy, no comfort, nothing that reminded them of home. The walls were covered with strange symbols that glowed with a pale blue light. Tae-ho was waiting in his cell, sitting cross-legged on the floor. His engineer uniform was dirty and torn, but his eyes were still sharp and alert. Next to him sat a young woman named Kang Subin. She had been just a student when they captured her ship, but 3 years in the fighting pits had changed her into something harder. "Captain," Tae-ho whispered, "I've been watching the guard patterns. They're getting sloppy, and I think I know where they keep the communication equipment." Subin shook her head. "We've tried to escape before. People died trying. The shock collars, the force fields, the hunting beasts they release when someone runs. It's impossible." "Maybe," Tae-ho said, "but I'm not talking about escaping. Not yet, I'm talking about sending a message." Dongwu felt his heart skip. A message to Earth? After 3 years of silence, could they really contact home? "The Velthari think we're just dumb animals," Tae-ho continued. "They don't watch us as closely as they should when we do maintenance work. I've been studying their systems. If I can get to the main communication array during the next arena event, I might be able to send out a signal." Hee-jin sat down beside them, her voice barely a whisper. "What would we tell them? That we're alive but trapped? That Earth should stay away from this part of space?" "No," Dongwu said firmly. "We tell them the truth. We tell them what these aliens have done to us. We tell them that humans don't give up and we don't forget." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. The humans quickly moved apart, pretending to be resting. A tall, thin figure appeared at the cell entrance. Commander Ji-hwan, their Velthari overseer, looked down at them with his large dark eyes. His skin was pale gray and his long fingers ended in sharp claws. "Tomorrow is a special day," Ji-hwan announced in his strange, musical voice. "The High Council is coming to watch the games. You will all perform well or you will be punished." Subin stood up slowly. She had learned to show no fear in front of the aliens. "What do you want us to fight this time? More of those lizard things? Or maybe something bigger?" Ji-hwan's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "Something much more interesting. We have acquired several new specimens from the Drakmor system, large, fast, and very hungry. The betting pools are already quite active." "And if we refuse to fight?" Dongwu asked. "Then you will be fed to the creatures anyway, but without weapons. The crowd enjoys both types of shows." Ji-hwan turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and the human female from Block C died in last night's match. Her opponent was enthusiastic." Hyojin made a small pained sound. Another human was gone. Another friend who would never see Earth again. After the alien left, the humans sat in silence. The reality of their situation pressed down on them like a heavy weight. They were entertainment for creatures who saw them as nothing more than clever animals. Their friends were dying for the amusement of beings who had never known what it meant to fight for survival. But Tae-ho was already thinking ahead. During tomorrow's games, all the guards will be watching the arena. The communication center will have minimum security. "If I can create a distraction, I'll help," Subin said. "I know the arena better than anyone. I can make sure the fights last long enough to give you time." Dongwu looked at his small group of survivors. They had been explorers once, scientists and engineers and diplomats sent to make peaceful contact with alien life. Now they were prisoners in a cosmic circus, forced to kill or be killed for the entertainment of their captors. But they were still human. They still remembered Earth, still carried the hope of seeing blue skies and breathing real air again. And most importantly, they still had each other. "If we're going to do this," Dongwu said, "we do it right. One chance, one message. We tell Earth exactly where we are and what's happened to us. We tell them that the new Soul Crew is still alive." Haijin reached out and took his hand. And then? Dongwu looked up at the strange stars beyond their cage. Somewhere out there, Earth was turning under its familiar sun. Somewhere out there, people were living free lives, not knowing that their explorers had become slaves in an alien zoo. "Then we wait," he said, "and we trust that Earth will remember us." The lights in their section dimmed, signaling the start of the station's night cycle. Around them, other human prisoners settled into restless sleep, haunted by dreams of home and nightmares of tomorrow's battles. But in the darkness, plans were being made. Hope was being kindled from the ashes of despair, and somewhere in the depths of space, a message was waiting to be sent that would change everything. The Velthari thought they had caged the humans. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been its individual power, but its refusal to abandon its own. The arena shook with the roars of thousands of alien spectators. The noise was so loud that Kim Tae-ho could feel it vibrating through the metal walls as he crawled through the maintenance tunnel. Above him, Kang Subin was fighting for her life against something that looked like a cross between a bear and a giant spider. Tae-ho forced himself not to think about what was happening in the arena. He had a job to do. The communication array was just ahead, hidden behind layers of alien technology that he had been studying for months. His hands shook as he worked, not from fear, but from excitement. After 3 years of silence, they were finally going to speak to the stars. In the arena, Subin rolled away from snapping jaws that dripped with acid. The creature was fast, but she had learned to be faster. 3 years of fighting had taught her things no human should ever need to know. How to kill with broken pieces of metal, how to find an enemy's weak spots in seconds, how to ignore pain and keep fighting when death was reaching for her. The crowd loved her. They called her the Earth Killer in their alien languages, and they bet enormous sums on her fights. She had become famous across Velthari space as the small human female who could defeat creatures twice her size. What they didn't know was that every victory made her hate them more. "Come on," she whispered to the monster circling her. "Let's give them a good show." Back in the tunnels, Tae-ho had reached the communication center. It was smaller than he had expected. Just a room full of strange alien computers covered in blinking lights. But he could see the main transmission unit, a crystal device that pulsed with energy. This was it. This was their chance. He pulled out the small device he had built from scraps of metal and wire. It wasn't much to look at, but if his calculations were correct, it would let him override the alien systems long enough to send one message. Just one chance to tell Earth that they were still alive. The fighting in the arena was getting more intense. Subin had wounded the creature, but it was getting angrier and more desperate. She could hear the crowd screaming for blood. They wanted to see her die or see her kill. They didn't care which, as long as it was entertaining. Commander Ji-hwan watched from his private box, his dark eyes following every move. He had made a fortune betting on the human female. She was his most valuable asset, the star of his collection. But lately, he had been receiving pressure from the High Council. They wanted him to expand his human program. They wanted him to capture more of these Deathworlders from their home planet. The plan was already in motion. A fleet of Velthari ships was being prepared for a massive raid on Earth. They would take thousands of humans this time, enough to supply arenas across their entire civilization. The humans would never know what hit them. In the tunnels, Tae-ho connected his device to the alien system. Sparks flew as the two technologies met, and for a moment he thought he had failed. But then the lights on his device started blinking, and he knew he was in. His fingers moved quickly over the controls, setting up the transmission. He had practiced this moment in his mind hundreds of times, memorizing every step. The message had to be simple but clear. It had to reach Earth, and it had to tell them everything they needed to know. In the arena, Subin finally found her opening. The creature lunged at her and she dove to the side, grabbing a piece of broken metal from the arena floor. As the monster turned to follow her, she drove the sharp edge deep into its neck. Green blood sprayed across the sand and the creature fell. The crowd went wild. They loved it when the human won. It made them feel safe, knowing that even the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy could be tamed and controlled by their superior technology. Subin stood in the center of the arena, covered in alien blood and breathing hard. She raised her fist to the crowd, playing the part they expected. But inside she was counting. How much longer did Teho need? In the communication center, the transmission was ready. Teho took a deep breath and activated the device. Energy flowed through the alien systems, carrying a human voice across the stars for the first time in 3 years. "This is Captain Lee Dongwu of the United Earth Fleet," the message began. Teho had recorded it weeks ago, during one of the few moments when the guards weren't listening. "We are humans from the planet Earth. For 3 years we have been imprisoned by aliens called the Velthari. They have forced us to fight in gladiator games for their entertainment." The message continued, giving their location and describing the horrors they had endured. But more importantly, it warned Earth about the coming attack. The Velthari were planning to raid their home world. They were coming for more humans. "We are the survivors of the exploration vessel New Soul," Dongwu's voice said across the void. "If anyone receives this message, please know that we are still alive, but we are running out of time. Earth must be warned. They are coming for our people." The transmission lasted only a few minutes, but those minutes changed everything. The message spread across space at the speed of light, reaching relay stations and communication networks throughout the galaxy. Some aliens who received it were horrified. Others were intrigued. But all of them understood one thing. The humans were not just animals. They were a spacefaring civilization, and they were in trouble. On Earth, the message was received by a monitoring station in orbit around the moon. Lieutenant Yoon Jae-sung was on duty when the transmission came through. At first he thought it was some kind of hoax. The New Soul had been declared lost with all hands 3 years ago, but as he listened to the message and ran it through verification protocols, he realized it was real. The voice patterns matched Captain Lee Dongwu's records. The technical details about their ship were accurate, and the coordinates they gave pointed to a region of space that Earth had marked as dangerous after several ships had disappeared there. Jae-sung immediately forwarded the message to Fleet Command. Within minutes, alarms were sounding throughout the United Earth Defense Headquarters. Admiral Choi Min-ho was pulled from a planning meeting and rushed to the communication center. "Play it again," he ordered after hearing the message the first time. As Dongwu's voice filled the room again, describing 3 years of imprisonment and torture, Min-ho's face grew darker. The admiral was a calm man, known for his careful thinking and strategic mind. But as he listened to the message, something cold and dangerous settled in his eyes. "Sir," Jae-sung said quietly, "there's more. We've been monitoring alien communications in that sector. There are reports of increased military activity, ships massing for some kind of large operation." "They're coming here," Min-ho said, just like the message warned. In the arena, the games were ending. Subin had been declared the winner and was being led back to her cell. The crowd was dispersing, satisfied with the entertainment they had received. Commander Ji-hwan was counting his profits and planning for tomorrow's events. None of them knew that across the galaxy, on a small blue world, humanity had just learned that its children were in chains. And humanity was very, very angry. Teho made it back to the human section just as the guards were locking down for the night. He found Dongwu waiting for him, along with Hyejin and Subin. "Did it work?" Dongwu asked. Teho nodded, exhaustion and hope warring in his expression. "The message is out there. If anyone is listening, they know we're alive." They sat together in the darkness, holding on to a fragile hope that somewhere, someone had heard their cry for help. They didn't know that their message had already reached Earth. They didn't know that their home world was mobilizing for war. All they knew was that for the first time in 3 years, they had spoken to the stars. And the stars, they hoped, would answer. The emergency session of Earth's Global Defense Council lasted 18 hours. Prime Minister Nam Gi-tae had called together every military leader, every scientist, and every diplomat on the planet. The message from the New Soul played over and over in the Great Assembly Hall, each repetition making the reality more terrible and more clear. "They've had our people for 3 years," Admiral Choi Min-ho reported to the packed room. 37 men and women, including some of our best explorers and scientists. "They've been used as entertainment, forced to fight alien creatures for the amusement of their captors." The room was silent except for the quiet sound of people trying not to cry. Everyone knew someone on that ship. Captain Lee Dongwu had been a hero, chosen to lead humanity's first deep space mission. Dr. Park Hae-jin had discovered 3 new forms of life in Earth's oceans. Kim Tae-ho had designed the engines that made interstellar travel possible. "What do we know about these Velthari?" asked Dr. Lim Yu-jin, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology. Fleet Admiral Park Seo-jun stood up, his face grim. "We've been monitoring their communications since we received the message. They're planning something big. A raid on Earth itself. They want to capture more humans for their gladiator games." A wave of angry voices swept through the room. The idea that aliens would dare to attack Earth, would dare to steal more of their people, filled everyone with rage. Prime Minister Nam raised his hand for silence. "How long do we have?" "Based on the ship movements we're tracking, maybe 6 weeks," Minho answered. "They're gathering vessels from across their empire. This isn't a small operation. They're planning to take thousands of our people. Then we stop them," Nam said simply. "Whatever it takes." Across the galaxy, the message from the human prisoners was causing different reactions. On the trading world of Nexus Prime, alien merchants who had done business with the Velthari suddenly began to understand why human artifacts were becoming so valuable. The Deathworlder relics they had been selling weren't from a dead civilization. They were stolen from living prisoners. Some aliens were horrified. The Kepler Union, a peaceful alliance of plant-based species, immediately condemned the Velthari and offered to help in any rescue attempt. The metal-eating forge builders, who had always respected warriors, declared the human treatment to be dishonorable and cut all trade with Velthari space. But others were intrigued. If these humans were really as dangerous as the Velthari claimed, if they were truly Deathworlders who could fight and kill alien creatures for entertainment, then perhaps they were worth studying. Several military-focused species began making inquiries about acquiring human specimens for their own purposes. On Earth, the mobilization began immediately. Every space dock in the system was converted to military production. The orbital shipyards around Mars worked around the clock, building new vessels with weapons that had never been tested in real combat. The asteroid mining stations were converted to produce ammunition and armor, but most importantly, Earth's entire military philosophy changed overnight. For decades, human space forces had been designed for exploration and peaceful contact with alien life. Now they were being rebuilt for war. Commander Baek Ji-woo, Earth's expert in psychological warfare, stood before a room full of military planners. "We need to understand our enemy," she said. "The Velthari see us as animals. They think we're just clever beasts who can be controlled and used. That's their weakness, and how is that a weakness?" asked Colonel Oh Kyung-soo, commander of Earth's Space Marines. "Because they don't expect us to think like a unified civilization," Beck explained. "They've been dealing with individual humans, prisoners who are cut off from their people and their resources. They have no idea what we can do when we work together." The planning continued day and night. Earth's best military minds worked on strategies they had hoped never to use. How do you rescue hostages from an alien space station? How do you fight enemies who have technology you don't understand? How do you make sure that what happened to the new soul never happens again? Meanwhile, in the Velthari Empire, panic was spreading. Commander Ji-hwan stood in his office aboard the specimen vault, staring at reports from across their territory. Somehow the humans had sent a message. Somehow their homeworld had learned about the gladiator program. "This is impossible," he said to his aide, a nervous young Velthari named Kexwin. "The human prisoners are constantly monitored. They have no access to communication equipment. Perhaps they build something from scrap materials," Kexwin suggested. "The reports say these creatures are remarkably clever." Ji-hwan's claws tapped against his desk as he thought. The humans in his collection had been subdued for 3 years. They fought when forced to fight, but they seemed broken, hopeless. He had never imagined they might still be planning and working together. "What about the raid on their homeworld?" he asked. "The High Council is still planning to proceed," Kexwin reported. "They believe the human military cannot be very advanced. After all, their exploration ship was easily captured." But Ji-hwan was beginning to have doubts. He had spent 3 years watching humans fight, and he had seen things that worried him. The way they adapted to new opponents. The way they worked together even in the arena, sometimes sacrificing themselves to help others win. The way they never seemed to completely give up hope. "Send a message to the High Council," he ordered. "I recommend we postpone the raid until we better understand what we're dealing with." In the human section of the specimen vault, the prisoners could feel something changing. The guards were more nervous, more watchful. There were fewer arena fights scheduled, and sometimes late at night they could hear their captors talking in worried voices through the walls. "Something's happening," Dongwu said to his fellow survivors. "They're scared of something." He-jin looked up from where she was treating a wounded human from the last fight. "Do you think our message got through?" "I think," said Subin, who had been listening at the wall, "that Earth knows we're alive. And I think our captors are starting to realize they made a mistake." Taeho was working on another device, something he had been building in secret for weeks. "If Earth is coming for us," he said quietly, "we need to be ready to help them when they arrive." Back on Earth, the final preparations were being made. The largest space fleet in human history was gathered in orbit around the moon. Hundreds of ships, from massive battle cruisers to fast attack vessels, all carrying weapons designed to fight enemies they had never seen. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Incheon's Fury, and looked out at the fleet. Every ship was crewed by volunteers. Every person aboard had lost friends or family on exploration missions. Everyone was ready to fight. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Velthari. It's an SOS." The message played across the bridge speakers. Commander Ji-hwan's voice, speaking in broken English he had learned from his human prisoners, filled the air with barely controlled panic. "This is Commander Ji-hwan of the Velthari Specimen Vault. The human subjects have broken containment. Repeat, the Deathworlders are loose. We require immediate military assistance. These creatures are not just specimens. They are weapons." "We may have made a grave error." Minho smiled for the first time in weeks. "Play that message on all channels," he ordered. "Let every alien in the galaxy hear it. Let them know that the Velthari are calling for help because they're afraid of 37 humans." The fleet began to move, heading toward the coordinates given in Dongwu's original message. They weren't going just to rescue their people anymore. They were going to make sure the galaxy understood that humanity protected its own. And in the darkness of space between the stars, something ancient and terrible was waking up. Humanity had been peaceful for so long that the galaxy had forgotten what humans were like when they were angry. The Velthari were about to remind everyone, the age of human exploration was over. The age of human justice had begun. The first thing the Velthari saw was darkness. The human fleet had emerged from faster-than-light travel on the edge of their system, but instead of announcing their presence, they had simply vanished. The alien sensors could detect nothing but empty space where moments before, there had been the energy signatures of hundreds of ships. Admiral Choi Minho stood on the bridge of the Incheon's Fury, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. 3 years of preparation had given Earth something the galaxy had never seen, a military force built from the ground up to fight an enemy that considered humans to be mere animals. "Stealth systems are holding," reported Captain Shin Bo-ra from her position commanding the scout vessels. "The aliens have no idea we're here." "Good," Minho replied. "Colonel Oh, are your boarding teams ready?" Colonel Oh Kyung-soo's voice came through the communication system from the assault ship Busan's Revenge. "Marines are locked and loaded, sir. We've studied every piece of intelligence about Velthari technology. We know their weak points. The human fleet was unlike anything that had ever operated in space. Where alien military forces relied on massive ships with powerful weapons, the humans had built something more clever. Their vessels were smaller, faster, and covered with technology that made them nearly invisible. But more importantly, they worked together like parts of a single organism." Commander Baek Ji-woo, monitoring communications from her psychological warfare ship, smiled as she listened to the panicked chatter between Velthari vessels. "They're trying to figure out where we went," she reported. "Their commanders are arguing about whether we were ever really here." The Velthari had made a critical error in their understanding of humanity. They had assumed that because they could capture one exploration vessel, all human ships were equally vulnerable. They had never imagined that Earth might learn from its mistakes and build something specifically designed to fight back. "Begin Phase 1, Minho ordered. Across the system, human ships began their attack, but they didn't target military vessels or defensive positions. Instead, they went after something far more important, the communication networks that held the Velthari Empire together. Captain Lee Dong-woo, still imprisoned aboard the specimen vault, felt the station shudder as explosions echoed through space around them. The human prisoners looked at each other with hope and fear. After 3 years of waiting, something was finally happening. "That's not alien weapons fire," Kim Tae-ho said, recognizing the sound patterns. "Those are human pulse cannons." Commander Ji-hwan rushed through the corridors of his station, his usual calm completely shattered. In the 3 hours since the human fleet had appeared and vanished, his empire's communications had been systematically destroyed. Relay stations, data centers, command posts, everything that allowed the Velthari to coordinate their vast territories was being eliminated with surgical precision. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "We can't even see them." "Sir?" the officer replied nervously. "We're receiving reports from across the Empire. The humans aren't just attacking this system. They're hitting targets in dozens of sectors simultaneously. It's like they're everywhere at once." What Ji-hwan didn't understand was that Earth had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. Human intelligence services had mapped every Velthari installation, every communication node, every supply depot. They had planned not just a rescue mission, but the complete dismantling of the empire that had enslaved their people. On Earth, the operation was being coordinated from a massive command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Prime Minister Nam Gitai stood beside Fleet Admiral Park Seo-jun, watching as reports came in from across the galaxy. "Phase 1 is complete," Seo-jun reported. "Velthari communication networks are down across 17 sectors. Their military forces can no longer coordinate effectively." "Casualties?" Nam asked. "Minimal on our side. The aliens never saw us coming. This was the new reality of human warfare. Where other species fought with brute force and overwhelming firepower, humans fought with intelligence, planning, and coordination. They had studied their enemy for 3 years and learned exactly how to hurt them where it mattered most." Phase 2 began at dawn in the Velthari home system. Suddenly, human ships became visible again, but not where the aliens expected them. They appeared directly above Velthari military bases, their weapons already charged and ready. "This is Admiral Choi Min-ho of the United Earth Fleet," his voice broadcast on all frequencies. "You have 37 human prisoners aboard various facilities in this system. You will release them immediately and surrender all personnel responsible for their capture and torture. You have 1 hour to comply." The response from the Velthari High Council was predictable. They demanded to know how the humans had penetrated their defenses. They threatened retaliation against human space. They declared that the prisoners were their property and would not be released. Min-ho listened to their response with cold patience. Then he nodded to his tactical officer. The first target was a Velthari military academy on their 4th moon. The building was evacuated. The humans had made sure of that. But the structure itself was completely vaporized by a focused energy beam that could be seen from orbit. "You now have 59 minutes, Min-ho announced calmly. What followed was a demonstration of precision and restraint that shocked the galaxy. The human fleet systematically destroyed every military installation in the system, but they did so with such accuracy that civilian casualties were almost zero. Buildings were evacuated before they were destroyed. Military personnel were given time to surrender. Non-combatants were actively protected. This was not the behavior of savage Deathworlders seeking revenge. This was the action of a civilization that had rules about warfare, even when fighting enemies who had shown them no mercy. Commander Ji-hwan watched from his station as his empire crumbled around him. Every few minutes, another military base would be destroyed with mathematical precision. The humans weren't just winning, they were demonstrating complete superiority in every aspect of warfare. "Sir," his aide whispered, "perhaps we should consider releasing the human prisoners." "The High Council will never agree to that," Ji-hwan replied. "They would rather die than show weakness to inferior species." But the High Council was learning that humans were not an inferior species. Reports were coming in from across their territory of alien populations rising up against Velthari rule. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had broadcast evidence of Velthari crimes to every world in their empire. Dr. Lim Yu-jin, Earth's xenopsychologist, had predicted this would happen. The Velthari rule through fear and the belief that they are superior, she had told the military planners. Once other species see that they can be defeated, that they are not invincible, their entire empire will collapse. She had been right. On world after world, alien species that had been conquered and enslaved by the Velthari were seeing human broadcasts showing the evidence of their crimes. They were learning that the superior Velthari were so weak that they needed to capture and torture other species for entertainment. With their communications networks destroyed and their military bases in ruins, the Velthari Empire was falling apart. Local governors were declaring independence. Military commanders were switching sides. Trade networks were collapsing as no one wanted to do business with a civilization that enslaved sentient beings for entertainment. 30 minutes remaining, Minho announced. On the specimen vault, the human prisoners could feel the station's systems failing around them. The lights flickered. The air recycling systems made strange noises and the guards had stopped making their regular rounds. They're going to try to kill us rather than let us be rescued, Dongwu realized. Ji-Huan would rather destroy the evidence than face justice. Taeho had been working frantically on his latest device, a small explosive made from maintenance equipment. If they want to destroy this place, we'll help them, he said grimly. But we'll do it our way. Kang Subin looked at the other prisoners, all 36 survivors of 3 years in hell. Are you ready to go home? They had been ready for 3 long years. Now finally home was coming to them. Admiral Minho checked his chronometer, 5 minutes remaining. In the distance, the Velthari homeworld was burning as their government buildings were systematically destroyed. But the humans had made sure that hospitals, schools, and civilian shelters were untouched. This was justice, not vengeance. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the specimen vault. It's Captain Lee Dongwu. Minho's heart stopped. After 3 years of hoping, his friend's voice filled the bridge. This is Captain Lee Dongwu to any Earth forces in the area. 36 human prisoners are alive and ready for extraction. We have control of sections C through F of the station. We're lighting a beacon for pickup. Through the darkness of space, a small light began to blink from the alien station. It was just a maintenance light that Taeho had rewired. But to the human fleet, it looked like the most beautiful star in the galaxy. All ships, Minho ordered, his voice thick with emotion. Prepare for rescue operations. We're bringing our people home. The rescue shuttle Soul's Promise docked with the specimen vault exactly 3 hours after Admiral Minho's ultimatum had expired. Colonel Oh Kyung-soo was the first through the airlock, followed by a team of Marines and medical personnel. What they found inside would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The human prisoners were waiting in the main corridor, standing in formation despite their ragged clothes and obvious injuries. Captain Lee Dongwu stepped forward and saluted, his voice steady despite 3 years of hell. 36 human survivors reporting for extraction, sir. We're ready to come home. Oh felt tears in his eyes as he returned the salute. Welcome back, Captain. Earth has been waiting for you. Behind them, Dr. Park Hyojin was helping wounded prisoners into the rescue ship. Kim Taeho carried a bag full of alien technology he had stolen and modified during their imprisonment. And Kang Subin looked back one last time at the arena, where she had been forced to fight for alien entertainment. Good riddance, she whispered. The station around them was in chaos. With their leadership structure destroyed and their communication networks down, the Velthari guards had either fled or were hiding in their quarters. Some had even surrendered to the human boarding parties, begging for mercy from the Deathworlders they had tormented for 3 years. Commander Ji-Huan was found in his private office, trying to destroy records of the Gladiator program. He looked up as human Marines entered, their weapons trained on him with deadly precision. You are under arrest for crimes against sentient beings, Colonel O announced formally. You will be transported to Earth for trial before an international tribunal. This is impossible, Ji-Huan said, his voice shaking. You are just animals. Advanced animals, perhaps, but still creatures from a death world. You cannot judge us. You're about to find out what animals from a death world can do, O replied coldly. Across the galaxy, the collapse of the Velthari Empire continued. On their homeworld, the surviving government officials were barricaded in underground bunkers, sending desperate messages to anyone who would listen. This is High Counselor Velnam of the Velthari Supremacy, one broadcast pleaded. We request immediate assistance from any allied powers. The human Deathworlders have invaded our space and are systematically destroying our civilization, but the allies they called to were busy dealing with their own problems. The human fleet hadn't just attacked Velthari military targets. They had also liberated every slave camp, every prison planet, every facility where the Velthari had held other species against their will. The Kepler Union, those peaceful plant-based aliens, found themselves suddenly in charge of refugee camps holding thousands of freed prisoners. The Forge builders discovered that their asteroid mining operations had been secretly using Velthari slave labor. Across the galaxy, species that had thought themselves civilized were confronting the ugly reality of what they had allowed to happen. Admiral Minho stood in the medical bay of his flagship, watching as Earth's best doctors examined the rescued prisoners. 3 years of imprisonment had left physical scars, but the psychological damage went even deeper. They're survivors, Dr. Lim Yu-jin reported after her initial evaluation. Traumatized but not broken. They maintained their humanity even under the worst conditions. And now, Minho asked, now they heal, and they help us make sure this never happens again. The trial of the Velthari war criminals lasted 6 months and was broadcast across the galaxy. It was the first time in galactic history that one species had held another accountable for crimes against sentient life. The evidence was overwhelming and horrifying. Commander Ji-hwan, facing a panel of judges from multiple species, including humans, tried to defend his actions. We believed they were just clever animals, he insisted. We thought we were studying primitive creatures, not dealing with an advanced civilization. Captain Lee Dong-woo, now fully recovered and back in uniform, stood to testify. Your Honor, the defendant knew exactly what we were. We told him repeatedly that we were explorers from Earth, that we had families waiting for us, that we were representatives of a peaceful civilization. He chose to ignore this because it was profitable to treat us as animals. The evidence was damning. Video recordings of the gladiator matches, financial records showing the profits made from human suffering, communications between Velthari officials discussing plans to raid Earth for more specimens. When the verdicts came down, they sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Ji-hwan and 17 other Velthari officials were sentenced to life imprisonment on a human prison colony. More importantly, the tribunal established new laws about the treatment of sapient beings and created an enforcement mechanism to make sure they were followed. The Terran Protectorate was born from the ashes of the Velthari Empire. It wasn't a government in the traditional sense, but rather a military and humanitarian organization dedicated to preventing atrocities like the Gladiator program from ever happening again. Fleet Admiral Park Seo-jun became its first commander, operating from a massive space station built at the edge of what had once been Velthari space. The station was crewed by volunteers from dozens of species, all united in a common cause. We're not conquerors, Seo-jun explained to a gathering of alien ambassadors. We're protectors. Earth doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to make sure that no species ever again uses sentient beings as entertainment or slave labor. The galaxy was learning to take those words seriously. Human patrol fleets had already shut down 3 other gladiator operations and liberated 2 slave worlds. They worked with local authorities when possible, but they made it clear that cooperation was optional. Justice was not. Back on Earth, the returned prisoners were trying to rebuild their lives. Some, like Dr. He-jin, threw themselves into studying alien biology to better understand the species humanity now protected. Others, like Tae-ho, worked on developing new technologies to help the Protectorate in its mission. Kang Subin chose a different path. She became an instructor at Earth's new Alien Combat Training Center, teaching human soldiers how to fight the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Her students called her the Arena Master, and they learned from someone who had survived 3 years of hell and come out stronger. The thing about fighting in alien arenas, she told her classes, is that you learn something important. No matter how big the monster, no matter how sharp its claws or how thick its armor, everything has a weakness. Everything can be defeated if you're smart enough, fast enough, and angry enough. Captain Dong-woo had perhaps the hardest adjustment. He had been the leader who couldn't save his crew from capture, the captain who had watched his people suffer for 3 years. But Earth had a different job for him. He became the first director of the Protectorate's Diplomatic Corps, the organization responsible for working with alien governments to prevent future atrocities. His experience as a prisoner gave him unique insight into how seemingly civilized species could commit horrible crimes. Never again, he said at his swearing-in ceremony. Not to humans, not to any sapient species. The galaxy is too big for us to patrol every world. but we can make sure that everyone knows we're watching. 5 years after the fall of the Velthari Empire, the galaxy was a very different place. The gladiator arenas were closed. The slave markets had been shut down. Species that had once preyed on the weak now found themselves facing human investigators and protectorate enforcement teams. Some aliens resented the new order. They complained that humans had appointed themselves the galaxy's police force without asking permission, but their complaints were answered by refugees who had been freed from Velthari camps, by former slaves who now lived as free beings, by families reunited after years of separation. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still injustices in the galaxy, still species that exploited others for profit or entertainment. But now there was also hope. Now there was someone watching, someone willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. On the 5th anniversary of their rescue, the survivors of the New Soul gathered at a memorial service for the crew members who hadn't made it home. 17 names were carved into a wall of black stone, 17 humans who had died in alien arenas far from home. Admiral Minho, now Supreme Commander of the Terran Protectorate, spoke to the assembled crowd of humans and aliens alike. These 17 people died as prisoners, he said, but their sacrifice gave birth to something greater than revenge. It gave birth to justice. It gave birth to a galaxy where no sentient being will ever again be caged for the entertainment of others. In the crowd, former Commander Jihuan sat in shackles, brought from his prison to witness the ceremony. He was older now, broken by years of confinement. As he listened to the human admiral speak of justice and protection, he finally understood the magnitude of his species' mistake. They had thought they were caging animals. Instead, they had awakened something that would reshape the galaxy itself. They had caged humanity's explorers and turned them into humanity's warriors. They had created their own nemesis, and in doing so, they had given the galaxy something it had never had before: hope. The memorial service ended with a moment of silence for the dead. Then, as the crowd dispersed, the work continued.